I don't know how to summarize or describe Orloff briefly. When you first meet Orloff, the depth of, told you. I'll do this for a while and hopefully I'll be able to get through it. But I can't remember when I first met Orloff. I do remember a lot of stories over the years. You and Barbara Walters. I knew I'd do this, but so I'll see if I can get it out. But I get emotional when I talk about people or things that are important to me. And Orloff is one of those people that you look back in, and if your lifetime you've got the opportunity to have 4 or 5 good friends, I think you really had some. And Orloff, I know, is one of those guys that if I needed something, if I was in trouble or whatever, I could call him and he'd be there. Wouldn't matter if I hadn't seen him for 5 or 10 years. I know that he's out there. There's so many different facets to Orloff. You've got the forgetful side, the side that you would think that he doesn't have it all together. Does some stuff that's really, really dumb. But it's just part of, I think he gets focused on, actually I don't know what it is, but he can get off in his own world and he gets focused on something, and the rest of the world becomes almost oblivious to him at times. So to sum up, I guess what I would say about Orloff is probably as kind a human being as I know. He treats people right. He I don't know anybody, well actually I do know a few people that don't like Orloff. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you haven't made a few enemies as you go through life, you haven't lived. But the ones that I know that don't like Orloff are people that I wouldn't care about knowing anyway. You know, it's just they're different. They don't have the same moral values that I think Orloff does. But he's just a very dear friend to anybody that treats him right. If you treat him right, he'll treat you right. But you don't want to be on the wrong side of him. I've seen that side of him too, and you don't want to be there. Some of the things that I remember about Orloff, one of the funniest stories, or, well, one of the funniest, I can't tell. He made me promise not to. But just ask him about Albuquerque sometime and see what he's got to say about that. But I remember one day I met him at his office, and I don't know what we were doing or why we were doing it, but it seems like we were going to Salt Lake for some reason, to do something. I don't remember, to look at a project or something. And we decided to take my car. And he said I think we went back to trade cars or something, but he went in his office for some reason, and I pulled up to meet him in front. So we took off and went to Salt Lake, and we come back about 4 or 5 hours later, and his car was still running out in the parking lot. He forgot to shut it off when we left. And back now, this goes back a long time. You got to know that I've known Orla for I don't know how long, probably over 50 years. And most people won't remember when they started getting readers on gas pumps that, you didn't have somebody pumping your gas. And I remember, the whole story's a little vague right now, but I remember Orlif got gas and drove off without paying for it. You just forgot you were supposed to pay for it because somebody had always taken your money when you got there. And we met someplace, and the police showed up to collect the gas bill. It was just, he was used to people putting gas in his car, and they weren't there doing it. And but I've never known him to take advantage of anybody over anything, and that's really unusual in the contracting business. Most of the guys that are in the contracting business, it's a ruthless business. There's tough people that are in it, and they aren't always concerned about what they've done to how they treat their customers and how fair they're going to be. I remember one time that Orla had done some work for me, and I complained a little bit about the hourly rate on a carpenter. And he says, "Oh, Ronald, I'm sorry. What do I owe you?" I mean, there was no question about it. If he thought that he had cheated me, well, he was going to make it right. That's all there was to it. And I've seen the other side of him where somebody tried to take advantage on the other side, and they wound up regretting it in the end. They just didn't want to mess around with him. He has his expectations of people and of himself are very high about what they should do. Orlif is so loyal to people. When he built the Rusty Parrot for me back in 1990, I don't remember how long he had been in business, construction at that point in time, but that's when Les Randall and he were partners in the deal and the story with Les. Anybody that knows Orlif, I think it's been around long enough, knows how that relationship started. But that was typical of what happens with Orlif. He makes friends, and people just are attracted to him. And that friendship that he had with Les over the years, and how tight that was, is only one of many. But when they come to Jackson Hole, that was when I really got close with Orlif, was when he built the Parrot. I'd known him for years before and we'd had a casual relationship. But when I asked him to give me a bid on building the Parrot, he was just one of 2 or 3 companies that I talked to. And when it got down to the time to make the decision on it, I don't remember if Orlif was a low bid, but it really didn't matter too much to me at that point because I knew he was the guy that I wanted to do it. By the way that he approached it, and the care and effort that he put into it, and the thought that went into it. And so he shows up, and he's got this young crew, a bunch of high school kids, is about what it amounted to. Had Mike that was the superintendent on the job, and Slade and Rowdy, and I don't remember all of them, but all these kids, these young bucks, that they were eager and they were aggressive and they worked long hours and they worked hard, and they spent the summer in Jackson Hole working. I think they worked 7 days a week, 12-hour days. Then afterwards, I don't know what all went on, but girls would come by and throw roses up at them. And I know the Cowboy Bar was involved in it, maybe the Rancher, but what all went on, I have no idea, but they sure made an impression on Jackson Hole. And I think that most of the guys that were on that crew are still involved with R&O. That's 26 years ago now that they were up here working on that, spent the summer. So to have that kind of loyalty in this day and age where most people have 6 or 7 jobs during their lifetime at least, to have those people stay speaks well of the culture that he's built into that company. Hires good people, treats them right, and doesn't expect unreasonable things out of them, but expects them to do right and treat people right. It all starts at the top of an organization, and that's where it's at. I look at Slade now and where he's gone, and the Slade that I knew up here and the Slade that we got today are two entirely different people. It's just amazing. Well, and I'm sure that's true of all the rest of them, and it's been a while since I've seen most of them, but I know they're around, and I know that it's ingrained in the company. But it was just that whole period of time. It was one of those iconic moments in my life. It's when we built that. It changed my life. Coming to Jackson Hole full time, and it was just Orloff was an important part of it. They built that little 32-room lodge in Jackson Hole, which at the time we didn't know it when we built it, but it turned out to be the best thing in Jackson Hole. It didn't start out as a luxury hotel, and it's kind of built that reputation over the years as being that kind of a place. And so it's well, it was just a life-changing experience, and I don't know that it ever would have happened without Orloff. We had some issues going into it, and wound up with a time frame that was almost impossible to do in it, but it was okay, let's just figure out how to do it, and they got the job done. So we've remained close over the years, and see each other not as often as I'd like to see. We're in Jackson. He's all over the world, it seems like, between Las Vegas and Guadalajara and Ogden. Our paths don't cross that often, but it's always a joy when we get together. We always enjoy each other's companies, and we're just a good friendship. And they're hard to come by, those kind of people. The quality of those friendships and the people that you know during your lifetime are really the longer you live, the more you realize how important those friendships are. And I cherish the fact that got a handful of people like that we feel that way about, and Orloff and Judy are right at the top of the list. Now I'll see if I can dream up some dirt on Orloff that we can use. When we were building the Parrot, Les come up with Orloff. Les, I think, was 80 years old at the time. We were building a fence out back, and there had to be some post holes dug for the fence posts to go in. And there was a couple of guys out there working on digging these post holes. And Les was standing there looking at them, and finally just said, "Well, give me a post hole digger," and he grabbed a post hole digger and a crowbar, went down to the other end of the fence from where these guys were at and started working. We come back a few hours later, and Les had dug almost all of the post holes, and these young guys that didn't know how to run a post hole digger were still fussing around with the first one or two. And Les hadn't even broke a sweat. He was just working away, just like, that's what was living on the farm. And so it it really amazed me. And Les was quite a guy. It was a pleasure to know him too, and that relationship. And and just the name of the company gives you an idea of how Orloff thinks. It wasn't Opikins and Randall. It was Randall and Opikins. Orloff was putting the other guy first before himself in it. And that's kind of the way he thinks. And that's what I've tried to do with my people too. I learned a lot of things from Orloff. And that's where you get your knowledge in life. When you've lived as long as I have, you look back and say, why did I do that? And a lot of the lessons I've got, I just kind of being around Orloff. There's some important things that I learned. And so part of our training that we do is involved around always put yourself, I say, on the other side of the counter, because at the Rusty Parrot Lodge, why, get the counter where people check in. And I always tell my people, I want you to put yourself on the other side of the table, on the other side of that counter, and see how you'd like to be treated. And you treat people that way. It's important to treat them like you want to be treated. And it's those little simple things like that are really not complicated in life, but it's amazing how many people don't think about that kind of thing. We were looking at Wyoming's got a code. It's the only state in the union that has a code, official state code. It's the Code of the West. And that's something, if you read that everything that's in there is stuff that Orliff does automatically without having to think about it. But it's just common sense things that the way you lead your life. Basically, it's a Western form of the golden rule type thing. It's about 10 things. It's things like finish what you start, ride for the brand. Things of that nature that often aren't thought about, but it's something that is ingrained in the Western culture. And I don't remember how many years ago. It was years ago when somebody came out with a video of that, and it's actually taught at the University of Wyoming in classes, the business school. And there's books read and that are written about it, and we have that posted in our hotel and expect our employees to live up to the Code of the West. So it's and Orliff does all those things without thinking about it. It's just ingrained in him. That's the way he's built. I don't know where he got that from. He's a lot smarter than he looks, I think, is what it boils down to. He's got good sense or something that somewhere along the line somebody done something right, and he's been very successful in passing that on to people that he associates with and his kids and everybody, I think, in his company. One of the things that Orliff almost got me in trouble on, back during the Olympics, when the Olympics were coming to Utah, when that first started, that Olympic movement started, and Tom Welch was starting to push the Olympic movement. Orliff was good friends with Tom. I knew Tom. I'd sold one of his clients a piece of ground, and I'd met Tom at the closing and thought a lot of Tom. I respected him a lot. He started doing that Olympic deal. And Orliff called me when on down the road after it got moving up closer to the bid time. Well, we had the Parrot open, and Orliff called me and wanted to know, have some suggestions of things that they might be able to give to people on the Olympic Committee. And I don't remember the whole conversation, but we put some stuff together that was used, I think, in the so-called bribery nonsense that went on that Tom got in so much trouble over. So I don't know if I come close to going to jail or anything, but I was involved in that somehow. And it's one of those things that I always felt like, and Tom got a bum rap on it, and Orliff was involved, I think, on the periphery. I know that he had quite a bit to do with it. I don't know what, but it was involved, and he was so loyal to Tom during all of it. I think any of us that knew Tom and knew what went on and how much he put into it realized that the Olympics would never have happened without Tom. And I know that Orliff had his part in that, but I was kind of proud of the fact that we might have contributed to the bribery scam some way. So. And I think there's a little different take on that from other people, but that's my claim to fame. Is that we might have been complicit in that whole deal, and I'm proud of it. So. Orliff has always liked his cars. I remember that Lincoln Continentals were a big deal back during the day when we were just going. Orliff was selling real estate, and I know he drove a Lincoln Continental, and Gail Winterow's a dear friend of ours, and we've got a common friendship there with Gail. Actually, I left Ogden to go to the Phoenix area and traded an office building that I had at the old Healy Mansion at 2580 Eccles on the other end of the block from the Weaver Club, and to Gail for some interest in some property in Phoenix. And Orliff wound up with that office building from Gale somehow, and they did some kind of a deal with it. And I'd met Gale years before when I was working on Powder Mountain and did the Scare Canyon Ranch project up on Monte Cristo and things. And the three of us have known each other for years. We've got a really close friendship there with Gale and Orloff and I. Gale's another one of those guys that I think a lot of, but I haven't seen Gale for a long time. He's talked to him a couple of years ago, but so we share that common bond. So Orloff wound up in my office building that I thought was one of the coolest office buildings in Ogden. That great old mansion that the mayor of Ogden, Mayor Healy, had built. It was based on a Irish castle. That's where he got the idea for it. And I had a lot of interesting ties to go back to Ogden, but I'm glad I'm in Jackson Hole and fond memories. But so lucky to be here, and Orloff can take some credit for making that happen. So.